America finally has some sort of return to cruising plan, and part of that plan includes doing test cruises. At the moment, we have no idea how long these test cruises are going to last for, because to be honest, we didn't know that we were going to have to do test cruises. Cruises have been happening in Europe for ages, and they haven't done any test cruises. Their test cruises were just regular cruises with regular passengers, but it does look like things are going to be quite different when it comes to restarting cruises in the US. Up until very, very recently, there has been a ban on cruising out of the US. The CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, said that nobody can cruise, but that ban did expire and it has been replaced by a massive 40-page document that outlines how we're going to get back to cruising. It's basically a long, long list of procedures and guidelines that the cruise lines have to prove that they're safe enough to cruise, and then at some point the CDC will allow passengers and real cruises to cruise again from the US. Part of this 40-page document talks about the cruise lines having to do simulated voyages. This is something that the cruise lines weren't ready to do. I think a lot of the cruise lines had an idea that we would be getting back to cruising soon. We saw a lot of crew members heading back to cruise ships, but I don't know that the cruise lines knew that they would have to do all of these test cruises in order to prove that they were safe enough to cruise. For months and months, the cruise lines have been saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do pretty much the same as what they're doing and that works in Europe, but they didn't know they were going to have to do test cruises. There were cruises planned throughout December, and almost all major cruise lines have cancelled them. Royal Caribbean, Carnival, Norwegian Cruise Line have cancelled all of their December cruises because they have to do test cruises now, which is something that they hadn't thought about probably a couple of weeks ago. It isn't just simulated voyages that the cruise lines have to do. If they want to cruise out of the US, they have to say that they want to cruise out of the US, they have to fill out loads of paperwork, they have to put in forms and say that they want their cruise ships here and there and this is what they're going to do. It seems like a very long procedure for the cruise lines and a lot of things they have to do before they can actually start cruising, which is why they can't do it right now. I think a lot of people thought that the CDC's ban on the US, when it came away, it would be like a light switch and we would go from no cruising to yes cruising, back to normal, everybody partying around the pool. And unfortunately, it's kind of gone from a hard no to a like, you can try. But that's good. At least we have some sort of things that we can try, which is all I think we can ask for, is the opportunity to prove ourselves and prove that these procedures work. We know they work, we've seen them in Europe. Come on, USA, you can do it too. One thing that I think is really important, and I'm really happy that this is the case, is that all of the cruise lines have said that they're not going to compete in regards to safety. So you're not going to see Royal Caribbean coming out and saying, Norwegian Cruise Line are rubbish, they're not as safe as us. The cruise lines have all agreed that safety things are just off bounds. They can compete on everything that they normally do, but they're not going to be fighting over the safety procedures, which is really good. It's in their interest for every cruise line to help the other cruise lines so that cruising can restart. So fingers crossed we'll see a bit more collaboration between the cruise lines. We have already seen that. Royal Caribbean and Norwegian Cruise Line set up a healthy sail panel, which they worked on together. So fingers crossed we'll see more cruise line collaboration as we move forward, because this is a much bigger problem than just a cruise line problem. This is a cruise industry problem, so we need to work together. When it comes to the actual test cruises will probably be pretty similar to regular cruises. The point is that they want to test everything that's going to happen on a normal cruise, so it wouldn't make sense for it to be too different. I think this might be similar to a shakedown cruise, which is what a cruise line does when they launch a new cruise ship. They'll get all the agents and bloggers and people on board who haven't paid in order to test everything out. On those cruises, not everything is perfect, but they need to find out these things so that they can fix them by the time that they get real paying passengers on board. Everybody who goes on these test cruises is going to have a coronavirus test before they go on the cruise and when they get off the cruise. That is pretty much what is happening in Europe at the moment. Viking Cruise Line have gone one step further and they've actually installed laboratories on their cruise ships so that they can test people on board the cruise. I think that is amazing and well done to Viking for doing that. If the other cruise lines could do that too, that would be fantastic. But of course, that is a massive investment. At the moment, the CDC and all the guidelines just say that when you embark a cruise and when you disembark a cruise, the ports should be able to give you a coronavirus test and give you the results. These test cruises are going to test everything. They're going to be testing embarkation, they're going to be testing disembarkation, they're going to be testing the food, the entertainment, how they can spread out the restaurants, how they can do everything that you would do on a normal cruise. So going on a test cruise, the experience should be pretty similar to a regular cruise, but they're still going to be figuring things out. For that reason, when you go on a test cruise, you have to sign a piece of paper that says, I know I'm going on a test cruise, this is at my own risk. It's not just like the cruise line is putting you in there and seeing what happens, but it's kind of on you because you have agreed to do this. They're actually going to have to go beyond what they would do on a normal cruise, and they're going to have to work out things like how would they deal with a passenger who had coronavirus. They're going to have to test all of their emergency procedures, similar to how they test the lifeboats and they do safety drills on cruises anyway. On these test cruises, they're going to have to do that plus coronavirus safety drills. So if somebody in a cabin phones the medical center, it sounds like they have coronavirus, they're going to have to do a drill to find out how they could get them to the isolation cabins, how they could do the tests. Everything like that is going to have to be tested and retested and tested and tested and tested. Following on from that, if they're doing a test of somebody who has coronavirus, they're also going to do a test of how they would quarantine the rest of the guests, what they would do with non-essential crew. They're going to have to go through everything and pretty much just simulate a coronavirus outbreak on a cruise. I understand some people would look at that and think, right, I'm going on a cruise that's going to pretend it has coronavirus on it. That doesn't sound like much fun, but you're still going on a cruise. I mean, this is a cruise that you couldn't go on otherwise, so I would love to. I really, really would love to. So personally, I would love to go on a test cruise. I'm happy to be a test guinea pig. The problem for me is I'm in the UK and I can't get out of the UK. And in the UK, we have no plans to do test cruises or return to cruising anytime soon. It is a super sad time to be here in the UK. We have no idea how long these tests are going to go on for. It's kind of a case of you have to do test voyages and you have to keep doing test voyages until the CDC are happy that the cruise lines have proved to a high enough standard that those cruises are safe. I think we've already proved this with MSC and Costa and other cruise lines cruising over in Europe. MSC have actually had over 30,000 passengers, I believe, on their cruise ships. They've not had an outbreak, and when the procedures are followed, it looks like they work very, very well. They've just got to prove that they can do this over in the US as well. When it comes to who is actually going to be on these test cruises, at the moment, they're not really too sure. It looks like it's going to be people that work for the cruise line, maybe their families, travel agents, people like that. It's mostly going to be people that work in the industry, and I don't think at the moment they have any plans to open this up to the wider public, at least in December. Another thing that kind of muddies this whole situation is CLIA. They're the Cruise Line International Association, and they have done another voluntary ban on cruising. So all the cruise lines that are members of CLIA, which is 95%, maybe more of cruise lines, have said, we won't cruise until the end of December. I think that's good because it gives the cruise lines December to try out these test cruises, probably with crew and people that work for the cruise lines. And then fingers crossed, by January, we will see some cruises with real paying passengers. Although it's going to be people that work for the cruise lines and travel agents, I think it's important to notice that the cruise lines have said that they're not going to make anybody go on a test cruise. To you and me, who probably really wants to go on a test cruise, this might seem a bit strange that some people wouldn't want to, but I totally understand why some people wouldn't want to cruise yet. If you're somebody who works for Royal Caribbean can't turn to you and say you've got to go on a test cruise, it's part of your job, because at the moment it is untested and you have to agree to it. So I think that's good. Every passenger taking part in a test cruise has to have a document signed by a health professional that says that they don't have any health problems that may affect them or make them more likely to have negative side effects if they did have coronavirus. That, of course, does limit quite a lot who can go on these test cruises, and everybody also has to be 18 plus to go on a test cruise. Don from over at Don's Family Vacations did raise a very good point about this. If they're just getting travel agents, people that work for cruise lines to do these test cruises, and also the healthier ones, it's not really a true representation of an actual cruise. But I don't think that that really matters too much because they're not so much testing the people on the cruise, they're testing that they can put the procedures in place. It's going to be different, of course, when they have paying passengers on board. Everybody who's doing these test cruises has agreed to strictly follow the procedures, and that might not be the case when real paying passengers get on board. But I think it is the best that the cruise lines can do at the moment, and you have to start somewhere. If you have to start with healthier, younger people on a cruise to test that they have the right capacity for the theatre and they can isolate people and all of that stuff, I think that's a good move. I think it's a step in the right direction, and then we'll move forward later onto people who have medical problems and the general population. Royal Caribbean have said that they're planning on probably having to do some tweaks and moderations after these test cruises, but it should just be little tweaks. It's not as if they're putting people on there untested. It's probably going to be things like, oh, reduce capacity in the theatre, that seating plan didn't work very well, we'll tweak that for the next cruise. Small things like that. What is going to happen on these test cruises should be what happens on a real cruise when we get there. This does raise some interesting questions for me. Me from the UK, we can't cruise yet in the UK. There's no signs of us cruising. But when we can get back to cruising, are we going to be doing test cruises? I'm not sure, to be honest with you, I'm not sure. It is interesting that Royal Caribbean, who are cruising out of the US and have to go through all of these test procedures, are starting up cruises in Singapore without any test cruises. They're going straight to cruising there. So at the moment, it is only the US where they're having to do test cruises. And I do wonder if we're going to have to do that in the UK. Looking at Italy and Germany and Norway, they all went straight into cruising. They didn't do any test cruises, and it has worked out quite well for them. I think we're in a good position now where cruise lines are already cruising. Not saying that we're just going to copy their procedures and guidelines, but we have a model that already works, and it wouldn't make any sense for us not to do the same things. So fingers crossed. I mean, I'm very happy to volunteer and be a test passenger if we need them in the UK, but I think we can go straight to real cruising. I think we know enough now. Here in the UK, for those of you who are from outside the UK, we have gone into a new lockdown and cruising feels further away than ever. So much has happened in the cruise industry in the last week or so. I hope that you're okay. I hope that you're okay. Another thing that's happened in the US recently is that Key West have voted to ban cruise ships that have more than 1,300 passengers from docking there. We'll see how that works. I'm not sure if cruise lines will just stop docking in Key West, but that's another thing that 2020 has thrown at us. They've said that they're going to look at the cruise ships that have the best environmental record and invite in the most environmentally friendly. I'm just not sure at the moment that the cruise lines are going to be willing to fight for Key West. I've been to Key West, amazing place. I've never been there on a cruise, but I don't know if this limitation would just make cruise lines think, oh, well, we'll just go somewhere else then. You clearly don't want cruise ships, we'll just go somewhere else. Over in Germany too, even though we've been talking about all of these German cruises and European cruises sailing and sailing well, Germany has gone into a new lockdown and some of their cruise lines have stopped cruising. It's quite interesting. It's not all of the German cruise lines that have stopped cruising. Some have said, okay, we'll stop, and others have said, no, we'll carry on. So in Europe at the moment, there still are cruises for Costa and MSC and TUI and other cruise lines. But at the moment, it is looking a bit more unsure than it has been recently. But fingers crossed, going into 2021, that's going to be our year. Things are going to be much, much better. There's actually a lot of things that go into if a cruise line can cruise. You might think it's just to do with coronavirus numbers, but it really isn't. In Italy, coronavirus numbers are skyrocketing and they're still cruising. In places like Australia, there's almost no coronavirus, but nobody is cruising. If you missed last week's video, we go way more into detail on that. Check it out next. A massive thank you to our Patreons and channel members who make videos like this possible. You can join the channel by pressing the join button below or head over to Patreon where you'll get exclusive access to a podcast and behind the scenes content.